The first time I saw her, she was dangling from the edge of the cliff, her small hands gripping nothing but loose earth, screaming at the wind to hold her. My heart froze. I had come to the canyon for water and solitude, but fate had thrown me into someone else's danger. The sun scorched the high desert rocks, turning the landscape into a shimmering, unforgiving oven. Dust swirled around my boots as I sprinted, feeling the burn in my lungs and the sting of sweat in my eyes. I reached out, my fingers brushing hers just before the ground beneath her gave way. With one hard yank, I pulled her up onto the solid rock. She collapsed against me, trembling, her chest rising and falling like a caged bird. Who are you?" she whispered, her brown eyes wide, reflecting equal parts fear and awe. Her dark hair was tangled with twigs, and her dress was torn in several places from the jagged rocks. "Name's Talon," I said, steadying her. My voice was low, calm, though adrenaline still thrummed in my veins. I glanced around, scanning for the signs of a bandit or predator, but there was nothing, just the emptiness of the canyon, hot and silent except for the faint cries of distant crows. I ran away," she admitted. Her voice shook. They said they'd lock me up if I didn't." Her words trailed off and I didn't press. Some stories are better left unfinished until the survivor is ready. The wind picked up, whipping loose strands of hair across her face. I brushed them back. "You can't stay here," I said. "It's not safe." Her lips trembled as she nodded, trying to summon courage she clearly didn't feel. I could see the stubborn spark in her, though a fire that refused to be snuffed out. We began the slow hike back to my camp, me carrying her small bundle of belongings, mostly tattered clothing and a cracked tin cup. I could feel her eyes on me the entire way, watching, learning, perhaps wondering why I had stopped to save her when the desert had taught most men to mind their own business. Night fell like a curtain, plunging the canyon into a shadowy maze. Stars winked overhead and the air cooled sharply. I led her to a small clearing beside a creek where I had made a lean-to from branches and an old canvas tarp. The fire I lit crackled, sending sparks dancing into the night sky. She huddled near it, staring into the flames like they held some secret she needed to understand. "Eat something," I said, offering her a hunk of bread and dried venison. She hesitated, then took it, her hand small and trembling. "Talon, why did you save me?" she asked finally, her voice barely more than a whisper. I knelt beside her, the firelight throwing shadows across my face. "Because no one should die clinging to the edge of the world while I stand by," I said. "And because sometimes you see someone in trouble and you do what's right, no matter the risk." She looked up at me, eyes wide, searching for more. I could see the unspoken question in them. What now? And I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew one thing, she wasn't leaving. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. And somehow, that scared me more than the desert, more than the cliffs, more than the lonely canyon winds, because in saving her, I hadn't just pulled her from a cliff. I'd pulled her into my life and I wasn't sure I wanted her to leave. The next morning, the canyon woke with a brittle stillness as if holding its breath. Liora stirred near the dying embers of the fire, her dark eyes scanning the horizon, alert even before the sun had fully crested the jagged rocks. I handed her a tin cup of cold creek water. "Drink slowly," I said, watching the way her small hand shook around the metal. She obeyed, though her gaze never left the cliffs above. You live here alone?" she asked, her voice quiet, as if afraid to disturb the desert. I shrugged, brushing a speck of dust off her shoulder. "Mostly. The desert doesn't need company, and neither do I, but apparently now I do." Her lips curled in the ghost of a smile. I'm Liora," she said. The name hung in the morning air, soft against the crunch of dry stones beneath my boots. We packed what little I had, a satchel of dried venison, a canteen, a small hunting knife. Liora clutched the bundle of her own meager belongings, and I could see her trying to steady her breathing against the exhaustion of yesterday's ordeal. We moved along the canyon floor, the trail winding through red sandstone walls that glowed like embers in the rising sun. My eyes were constantly scanning the horizon. The desert could be unforgiving, but the real danger came from men. Bandits, drifters, anyone who'd see a young girl alone and think opportunity. Do you know why I was running? Liora asked after a long silence, her voice barely above the whispering wind. I waited. She hesitated, then shook her head. My guardian, she said finally. He wanted me to marry some rich man in town. I didn't want that. I ran. Her voice cracked, and she bit her lip to stop herself from crying. I tightened my grip on the strap of my satchel. No one should be forced into that, I said, low and steady. Not here, not anywhere. The day passed in silence, punctuated only by the scuff of our boots against stones and the occasional cry of a hawk overhead. Around mid-afternoon, the canyon opened to a small desert plateau dotted with scrub and the occasional mesquite tree. That's when we saw it, a rusted stagecoach, abandoned, wheels half buried in sand. Looks like trouble found someone else, I muttered, moving closer cautiously. Liora stayed behind me, her hand brushing the knife at my belt, not out of fear, but instinct. The stagecoach door creaked as I nudged it open. Inside, overturned blankets and broken crates hinted at a robbery or worse. I scanned the area. Tracks led off into the rocks. We're not alone, I murmured. Before I could finish, a low whistle echoed through the plateau. From behind a ridge, 3 figures emerged, cloaked in dust and shadow. Bandits, by the look of their rifles. I stepped in front of Liora, muscles coiled, eyes narrowing. Stay behind me, I warned. The bandits hesitated, sizing me up. I could see their surprised muscular, shirtless, long black hair whipping in the wind, tribal jewelry glinting in the sun. Not a man they expected to face in the middle of the desert. I clenched my fists, ready for whatever came. Liora's hand brushed mine, small and warm. Her courage was quiet, but real. I gave her a slight nod, a silent promise. I'd protect her, no matter what doubt the wind kicked up and dust swirled around us. The bandits' expressions flickered between fear and greed, unsure whether to attack or retreat. And for the first time, Liora didn't look like a helpless child. She looked like someone who had survived cliffs, desert, and now, danger in the open sun. The canyon seemed to hold its breath again, waiting for the choice we would make: fight, run, or find some clever way out. I tightened my jaw. Whatever it took, we weren't letting them take her. Not her. Not today. And in that moment, under the blazing sky, I realized something I hadn't admitted even to myself. Saving her wasn't just about duty anymore. It was about something deeper. Something that pulled at my chest in ways the desert never had, because she wasn't just following me. She was staying, and I couldn't let her go, not now, not ever. The wind howled through the plateau like a living thing, carrying grit into our eyes as I scanned the horizon. The bandits hadn't advanced, but their presence pressed on us like the weight of the desert sun. Liora stayed close, her small hand brushing against mine, a silent anchor. Can we outrun them? She asked, voice tight. I shook my head. Not this terrain. Too exposed. My eyes swept the rocky outcroppings nearby. A narrow canyon led deeper into the plateau. Cliffs on either side that could hide us, but it also could trap us if we weren't careful. Survival in the desert meant using the land, not fighting it. I led her to the canyon entrance, muscles taut, every sense alert. Liora's gaze lingered on my bare chest, the muscles flexing with each step. I caught her looking, and for a fraction of a second, she smiled, a brief flicker of trust in the midst of fear. The canyon walls rose like jagged teeth on either side, shadows stretching long across the sand. I could hear the faint creak of the bandits' stagecoach wheels in the distance. "We'll move quietly," I said. "Stick close," Liora nodded, biting her lip, and we moved through the narrow passage, rocks crunching softly under our feet. I could see the muscles in her small arms tighten around her bundle, determination etched into her young face. She wasn't just a child anymore, she was learning, adapting, surviving. As we rounded a bend, I froze. A small cave opening appeared halfway up the canyon wall, just large enough for us to hide. Dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming over the rocks. "Here," I whispered. "We can wait them out inside." Inside the cave, shadows swallowed us. I crouched, motioning for Liora to stay low. She followed without hesitation, her wide eyes taking in the darkness, the earthy smell of damp stone, and the faint scurry of desert rats in the back. I pulled out a small flint, sparking a tiny fire that cast flickering light on our faces. "You saved me," Liora said suddenly, breaking the tense silence. "Why? Why do you care so much?" Her voice was soft, almost fragile. I exhaled slowly. I don't know if it's care in the way people expect. But I can't stand by while someone's life is in danger. Not yours. Not anyone's." I met her gaze, and for a moment the canyon outside seemed to fade. "Besides," I added, almost to myself, "you're not just anyone." She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I won't forget this," she said. I nodded, but my mind was already on the bandits. I had seen desperate men before, and desperate men in the desert were unpredictable. They might leave, or they might track us. We couldn't stay here long. I taught Liora how to move silently on the rocky floor, how to watch the wind for signs of movement, and how to blend with the shadows. Her small hands mimicked mine as I showed her the delicate pressure needed to step without a sound. For the first time, she wasn't trembling, she was learning. Hours passed. The bandits never appeared. The cave offered shelter, but the desert wasn't done testing us. Hunger gnawed, and thirst whispered its warning. I shared what little food I had, rationing each bite carefully. Liora ate slowly, eyes darting to the entrance. Alert to every sound. By the time the sun began to dip behind the cliffs, painting the canyon in blood-orange hues, I realized something dangerous. Liora had begun following me not just because she needed protection. She followed because she trusted me, and that trust was becoming a weight I didn't know I was ready to bear. I crouched beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow," I said quietly, "we move again. The desert is wide, and we'll find a safer place. But you have to stay close. Can you do that?" She nodded, her brown eyes reflecting the last light of the sun. "I'll stay with you," she whispered, and I knew, then, that saving her had done more than pull her from danger. It had pulled her into my life, and whatever the desert held next, we would face it together. The canyon walls loomed overhead, dark and silent as night descended. Somewhere beyond the rocks, danger still waited. But for now, Talon and Liora were alive, and that was enough. The next morning, the canyon air was sharp and cold, the kind that burns the lungs with every breath. I led Liora carefully down a narrow trail, winding between jagged red cliffs, each step a negotiation with gravity and loose stones. She followed closely, her small hand brushing mine more for reassurance than guidance. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice low, cautious. "To water," I said. "The creek inside the plateau won't last long. We need to reach the river before sundown, or the desert will take it all." The path widened into a shallow basin, the dry sand crunching under our boots. I scanned the area. The desert was deceptively calm. But I'd learned long ago that stillness often hides danger snakes, scorpions, and desperate men alike. Leora's eyes mirrored the tension I felt. Survival in the Old West demanded awareness at every turn. We crested a small ridge and spotted it. The desert river, glinting like liquid silver under the scorching sun, snaking through the plateau. Relief washed over us briefly, but the river's beauty hid a hidden threat. The banks were steep, jagged rocks lined the water's edge, and the current was deceptively strong. One wrong step could spell disaster. I motioned for Liora to stay close as we descended. She moved silently, mimicking the careful grace I had shown her, her small frame surprisingly agile on the loose rocks. I admired her resolve, even as the desert tested it at every step. Halfway down, a sudden rustle in the shrubs froze us. I crouched low, instincts sharpening. A pair of glowing eyes stared from the shadows, a coyote, thin but fierce, its teeth bared. Leora's hand tightened on mine. "Stay behind me," I whispered, moving between her and the animal. The coyote circled, snarling, but I held my ground, muscles tensed and ready. My voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the desert silence. "Go. Now." The animal hesitated, then slunk away into the underbrush. Liora exhaled sharply, relief washing over her features, but I could see the fear linger. We reached the riverbank, the water rushing cold and clear. I knelt, letting Liora cup her hands and drink, the cold water bringing color back to her pale cheeks. "We need to cross," I said. "But carefully." "The current is strong," she nodded, following my lead as we stepped cautiously onto the slick stones. I tested each step first, feeling the water's pull, then guided her hand in mine. The river was a test of patience, balance, and trust. Every slip could be fatal. Halfway across, a shadow loomed on the opposite bank. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured by a scarf. My hand tightened on the knife at my belt. Liora froze, clutching my arm. "Who's that?" she whispered. I didn't answer immediately. The stranger's posture was deliberate, watching us, studying us. Something in his stance told me he wasn't just a traveler, he was tracking us. Perhaps he knew of Leora's past, or perhaps he was just another desert predator. Either way, he posed a threat. "Keep moving," I urged quietly. "Don't look back." The river's current tugged at our legs, but we made it across, hearts pounding, boots soaked. Leora's grip on my arm was firm, unshakable. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just a child in need of protection. She was becoming my equal in the desert's harsh. Lessons. As we reached the far bank, the man turned and vanished into the rocks. But the tension lingered, a reminder that the desert was never truly empty, and that danger could emerge when least expected. We found shelter under a rocky overhang, watching the river's silver ribbon twist through the canyon. Liora shivered, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I handed her a piece of dried venison. "Rest," I said. "We'll move again at first light." She looked at me with wide, wary eyes. "Talon, will he come back?" I didn't answer. Some dangers can't be reasoned with. They can only be survived. But one thing was certain, whatever came next, we would face it together. The desert had claimed many, but it hadn't claimed us not yet, and as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, painting the canyon in crimson and gold, I realized saving Liora had brought more than responsibility, it had brought connection, trust, and a bond I could not ignore. The desert night fell, and we remained vigilant, ready for whatever shadow might emerge next. The morning sun burned through the canyon like molten gold, casting long shadows across the cracked desert floor. Liora moved beside me, silent and alert, her small hand brushing mine instinctively. We had learned to move together, step by step, breath by breath, as if the desert itself were teaching us a language of survival. The river behind us was a distant glimmer now, replaced by the rugged expanse of red mesa. Sparse scrub and jagged rocks created hiding spots for both predator and prey, and I knew the bandits or the stranger from the river could be anywhere. I scanned the horizon, muscles taut, senses sharp. Leora's eyes mirrored my tension. Are we going the right way? She asked, her voice tight. Yes, I said, keeping my gaze on the plateau above us. But we need to be ready. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes. As we crested a rocky rise, a sudden clatter erupted from behind a boulder. Dust and gravel skittered across the rocks, and a harsh shout echoed through the canyon. I pushed Liora down behind a jagged outcrop, pressing her close to my chest. My bare arms flexed instinctively, shielding her. 3 bandits emerged, rifles leveled, their faces masked by dust and sweat. Their eyes widened at the sight of me, muscular, shirtless, long black hair glinting in the sun, tribal jewelry catching the light. They underestimated the desert's guardian. Step aside, boy. The tallest one barked, cocking his rifle. I shook my head. Not happening. My voice was calm, low, but firm. Every movement was precise, honed from years in the desert. You want trouble? You'll get it. The first bandit lunged, knife drawn. I sidestepped, catching his arm and twisting, sending him sprawling across the rocks. Liora flinched, clutching my arm, but I gave her a small, reassuring nod. Watch and learn, I whispered. The second bandit raised his rifle, aiming at Liora. Without hesitation, I sprinted forward, a blur of motion, catching the gun barrel with my free hand and twisting it aside. The rifle discharged harmlessly into the sand. Leora's eyes were wide with fear, but also admiration. The final bandit tried to circle behind us, but I kicked a rock into his path, tripping him. The canyon echoed with shouts, grunts, and the scraping of boots on stone. I kept my focus on protecting Liora, my every movement a shield against their aggression. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, I crouched beside Liora, brushing dirt from her hair. You okay? I asked. She nodded, trembling but smiling faintly. I think so. I scanned the canyon. The bandits were down, but not gone. Shadows in the distance hinted they weren't finished. We need to move. Now, I said, grabbing her hand and pulling her along the rocky trail. We ran, leaping across boulders and ducking under overhangs, hearts pounding, lungs burning. The desert seemed to cheer us on, winds howling through the rocks, kicking up dust that hid our trail. Liora kept close, mirroring my movements perfectly. She was no longer just a child being protected, she was learning to survive, and the bond between us grew stronger with every step. Finally, we reached a narrow canyon that twisted like a serpent through red mesa. I slowed, letting Liora catch her breath. We'll rest here, I said, but stay close. No wandering. She sank onto a flat rock, exhausted, but her eyes never left me. Talon, I trust you, she whispered. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Saving her had changed everything. She wasn't just following me out of necessity, she was choosing to stay. And I had chosen to protect her with every fiber of my being. The desert night approached, shadows stretching across the canyon walls. Somewhere out there, danger still lurked. But for now, we were alive, together, and stronger than the desert itself. And I knew, as the wind whispered around us, that whatever came next, we would face it as one Talon and Liora, bound by survival, trust, and an unspoken promise neither would break. The first light of dawn painted the canyon walls in gold and crimson, and I roused Liora from her uneasy sleep. She blinked up at me, tired but alert, and instinctively clutched the small satchel she carried. Are we safe now? She asked softly. For a while, I said, scanning the horizon. The desert was unpredictable, but I knew of a place that might give us shelter, a hidden settlement tucked away behind the red mesa cliffs, a few miles north. Few outsiders knew of it, and the people there had survived by staying hidden. We moved carefully, the rocky trail twisting beneath our boots. Liora followed without hesitation, her steps growing surer with each passing hour. The bond between us had deepened. She trusted me, and I trusted her instincts. I could feel her learning, adapting, becoming stronger with every challenge. By mid-morning, the trail narrowed and opened into a secluded alcove shaded by overhanging rocks. I motioned for Liora to stay quiet. "This is it," I whispered. "We're almost there. But stay close and don't make a sound." We crept forward, and through a narrow gap in the rocks, I glimpsed the settlement. Small adobe homes clustered near a spring, smoke curling from chimneys, and figures moving about: farmers, hunters, and children. It was a hidden oasis, a rare slice of life in the harsh desert. Leora's eyes widened, a mix of awe and relief. "People really live here?" she whispered. "Yes," I said softly, "but they don't trust strangers easily. We need to show we mean no harm." I stepped out first, hands raised slightly, the sunlight glinting off my tribal jewelry. Liora followed close behind, her posture careful but not afraid. A tall man approached, bowie knife at his belt, eyes wary but not hostile. "You two come from the canyon?" he asked, voice rough but not unkind. "Yes," I said. "I'm Talon, and this is Liora. We're just looking for shelter, a safe place to rest." The man studied us for a long moment, then nodded subtly. "Follow me, but stay close. No wandering." We were led through the settlement, passing adobe homes with sun-bleached walls, children playing under the shade of mesquite trees, and women tending small gardens. The smell of baking bread and fresh herbs mingled with the desert air. Leora's face softened, a rare smile breaking through the tension she had carried for days. We were brought to a small hut near the spring. Inside, simple furnishings, a cot, a clay stove, and a wooden table were all that awaited us. I set down our satchels and let Liora sit. She breathed deeply, finally letting some of her tension slip away. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly, looking up at me. Her brown eyes searched mine, full of curiosity and trust. I paused, unsure how to answer. "Because you needed someone," I said finally. "And because sometimes you see someone in trouble and you do what's right, no matter the risk." She nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the cot. I trust you," she whispered. I felt the weight of her words settle on me. Saving her had brought more than responsibility. It had brought connection, trust, and an unspoken promise. And now, in this hidden settlement, I realized we had a chance not just to survive, but to rest, to regroup, and to plan our next steps. As the sun climbed higher, I stepped outside, scanning the horizon. The desert was still vast, still dangerous, but for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Liora had survived cliffs, bandits, and rivers. She was stronger than she realized, and I would ensure she stayed that way. The settlement was quiet but alive, a fragile sanctuary. And in that quiet, I knew that saving Liora had changed my life as much as it had changed hers. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, Talon and Liora, bound by trust, survival, and an unspoken promise that neither of us would break. The hidden settlement slept under a star-strewn sky, the desert wind whispering through the mesquite trees. I sat outside the small hut, Talon muscular, shirtless, long black hair flowing, tribal jewelry glinting in the moonlight keeping watch. Liora slept beside me, wrapped in a thin blanket, exhaustion finally overtaking her. But even in sleep, her small hand reached out, brushing against mine instinctively. The calm of the night was deceptive. I could feel it, the tension lingering in the desert. Threats had a way of finding you, no matter how hidden you were. My instinct screamed that someone was approaching. I stood slowly, muscles coiled, eyes scanning the horizon. A shadow moved near the edge of the settlement. I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. The stranger from the river, the tall man in the scarf, emerged from behind a rock, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on Liora. I stepped forward, bare feet crunching softly on the sand, voice low but commanding. "Stay back," the man smirked. "You can't hide a child forever," he said. "I know who she is, and I know what she carries. Hand her over, and no one gets hurt." Liora stirred, eyes fluttering open, confusion and fear mixing with trust. She looked at me, then at the intruder. "Talon," she whispered, gripping my arm. I took a deep breath. "I won't let you harm her," I said, muscles tensing, ready for confrontation. But I didn't move too quickly. The desert had taught me patience. One wrong move and it could be fatal. The man laughed, cocking his rifle. "You think you can stop me? You're just one man and she's a child." But I was more than just one man. I was a protector, trained in the ways of the desert, attuned to its dangers, and connected to this girl in a way that neither of us had anticipated. I stepped forward, every muscle taut, eyes locked on the intruder. "Liora," I whispered, "stay behind me. Watch carefully." The man charged and instinct took over. I sidestepped, catching his wrist and twisting him to the ground. Liora gasped but stayed behind me, eyes wide. I could feel her heartbeat against my back, steadying her fear. The intruder struggled, but I kept him pinned, my body shielding her. "You'll not take her," I said, voice calm but deadly. "Not tonight. Not ever." He froze, realizing that brute force wouldn't work against someone who knew the desert, who moved with its rhythm, who protected what mattered most. Slowly, he released his tension, backing away into the shadows. I didn't relax until he disappeared entirely into the night. I turned to Liora, seeing both fear and relief in her eyes. "It's over," I said softly. "You're safe." She threw her arms around me, hugging me tightly. "Thank you, Talon. I don't know what I'd have done without you." I held her close, feeling the weight of all we had endured, the cliffs, the river, the bandits, the desert itself, and how far she had come. She was no longer a helpless child. She was brave, resilient, and alive. As dawn broke, painting the desert in gold and amber, I knew the choice we had made to trust, to survive together, had bound us irrevocably. Liora looked up at me, eyes filled with determination. "Where to now?" she asked. I smiled faintly, the sun warming my skin. "Wherever the desert lets us go. Together." She nodded, understanding that survival was only part of our journey. Trust, loyalty, and the bond we had forged mattered just as much. The hidden settlement faded behind us as we moved forward. Side by side, the canyon walls casting long shadows over our path. The desert was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but we faced it together. Talon and Liora, survivor and protector, bound by trust and an unspoken promise. No matter what came, neither would be abandoned. And for the first time, I realized that saving her had done more than protect her life, it had changed mine. She wasn't just following me anymore. She was my reason to move forward, my anchor in the desert, and perhaps, in a world so vast and unforgiving, my only true companion. The desert stretched ahead, endless and golden, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone. We walked together into the rising sun, shadows behind us, hope ahead.